Mrs. Hart stepped out into the crisp morning air to check the mailbox. Amid bills and advertisements, a sleek envelope caught her eye. It bore the golden crest of Starlight Academy for Excellence, the elite boarding school her daughter Sienna had applied to on a scholarship. Her heart raced as she carried the letter inside and placed it on the dining table where her husband, Mr. Hart, was engrossed in the morning newspaper. Mr. Hart noticed the envelope immediately.
Sienna.
He called out. Moments later, Sienna appeared, a curious look on her face.
Sir?
She asked. Mr. Hart gestured to the letter.
It's addressed to you. Open it.
With trembling hands, Sienna tore open the envelope. Her eyes darted across the page before she let out a squeal.
I got in. I got accepted to Starlight Academy.
She shouted, bouncing on her toes. Mrs. Hart rushed over, enveloping her daughter in a warm hug.
Praise God. I knew you could do it,
she said, beaming with pride. Mr. Hart joined the hug, patting Sienna on the back.
We're so proud of you, sweetheart.
Just then, the house phone rang. Sienna broke away to answer it, still clutching her acceptance letter. On the other end of the line, her best friend Tova's voice burst through.
Sienna, I got accepted to Starlight Academy,
she exclaimed. Sienna gasped.
Tova, me too.
The two girls squealed in unison, quickly making plans to meet up later. When Sienna returned to the dining room, her face was alight with joy.
Tova's going to Starlight Academy too,
she announced. Mrs. Hart clasped her hands together.
Thank God. I was a little worried you'd be alone, but God has already taken care of it.
Sienna smiled.
He always does.
Mr. Hart stood up and said with a grin.
Well then, you better start packing.
The day of departure came faster than anyone expected. Mrs. Hart drove Sienna and Tova to the school. They parked in the lot, and before the girls could step out, Mrs. Hart turned to them.
Remember Romans 12, verse 2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You're the light of the world. Let your light shine for others to see.
The girls nodded solemnly.
We'll remember, Mrs. Hart,
Tova promised.
And we'll let our light shine,
Sienna added with a determined smile. With that, they stepped out of the car, waved goodbye, and marched toward the towering gates of Starlight Academy. Sienna and Tova thrived at Starlight Academy. They always had the best grades, worked hard, and were always found hanging out at the Bible study group. One day during class, the teacher announced that new students had arrived, and they should give them a warm welcome. Two beautiful girls entered the classroom and the teacher introduced them as Zara and Juniper to the class. The students greeted them as they walked to their seats, exuding confidence and a touch of arrogance. As the class continued, Sienna turned to Tova, her eyes wide with admiration.
Wow, they're so cool and pretty,
she whispered. Tova glanced at her and urged.
Focus on the class.
Sienna rolled her eyes, but complied. After the bell rang, Sienna quickly ran after Zara and Juniper, eager to welcome them. She complimented their style and their necklaces. The girls offered fake smiles and curtly thanked her before walking off, leaving Sienna standing there, still admiring them. Tova called out to her, asking why she left her behind.
Just wanted to welcome the new students,
Sienna explained. Tova frowned but didn't say more, and they headed back to their hostel. One afternoon during lunch, Sienna noticed Juniper and Zara sitting with three guys. She excused herself from Tova, promising to be back soon. Tova frowned but returned to her meal. Sienna walked over to the group, greeting them, but the girls just gave her a half-hearted
Hi.
before returning to their conversation. One of the guys, who had been scrolling on his phone, looked up and froze. He smiled and quickly stood up to shake Sienna's hand. He introduced himself as Zion. They chatted, and before long, Sienna lost track of time. Tova came over and told her they'd be late for class. Sienna quickly said goodbye to Zion, who smiled and told her.
See you around.
As the days went by, Zion and Sienna grew closer, and slowly, Zara and Juniper allowed her to become part of their group, mostly because Zion always seemed to want her around. However, Tova became concerned. Sienna had stopped praying with her every night, was often late to Bible study, and seemed to avoid spending time with her. One day, Tova asked Sienna why she had been late to Bible study and why she wasn't hanging out with her anymore. Sienna shrugged and rolled her eyes.
So what if I'm late? It's no big deal if I miss a few days of Bible study.
She replied dismissively. Tova was unsure of what to do. She didn't want to worry Mrs. Hart, so she decided to pray for guidance. One night, as Sienna was about to enter the room she shared with Tova to sleep, Juniper stopped her. She asked if Sienna was willing to join them for an outing. Sienna was taken aback when she realized they planned to sneak out that night, which was strictly against the rules. Juniper snapped at her.
Are you coming, or are you going to act like a child and waste our time?
Feeling pressured by what might be said about her if she refused, Sienna decided to follow them. The girls sneaked out of the hostel, making their way through the quiet streets just a few blocks from the school. At an alleyway, Zion and the other two guys, Tommy and Dominic, were waiting with their motorcycles. Juniper and Zara quickly threw on their helmets and hopped onto Tommy's and Dominic's bikes, ready to ride off. Sienna, feeling a bit out of place, hesitated. Zion, with a grin, handed her a helmet.
Come on.
He said. Sienna didn't want to appear naive, so she reluctantly agreed and climbed onto his bike. They sped off, quickly catching up to the others. When they arrived at their destination, Sienna was shocked to see that they were in front of a nightclub. She looked at Zion, who shrugged with a smile. They walked past the bouncer and straight into the VIP lounge. Dominic handed Zara a bag, and Zara, taking Sienna's hand, led her toward the restroom with Juniper following. Inside, the girls quickly changed into outfits that Sienna felt were much too revealing. They handed her one as well. Sienna looked at it, then back at the girls, then at the outfit again.
Don't you have something, less revealing?
She nervously asked. The girls groaned, and not wanting to annoy them further, Sienna quickly changed. They did her makeup, and when Sienna looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the person staring back. They walked back out, where the guys were sitting on the couch, drinking beer. Zion glanced up and smirked at her, but Sienna couldn't hold his gaze and quickly looked away, blushing. He got up, walked over to her, and complimented her beauty before asking her to dance. Sienna, despite her reservations, agreed, and they danced together. By the end of the night, Sienna had so much fun that it became a regular thing. Every night, they would sneak out and head to the club. But soon, Tova noticed something was off. Sienna was always tired in class, her grades slipping, and she stopped attending Bible study altogether. Concerned, Tova tried to ask Sienna what was going on.
What's happening to you?
She asked gently. But Sienna snapped.
Mind your own business, Tova. Stop talking to me.
Hurt by her words, Tova kept her distance but never stopped praying for her friend. One night at the club, while they were dancing, Sienna suddenly felt thirsty. Zion offered to get her a drink. When he returned with it, she smiled, took a sip, and almost immediately started feeling tired. Zion, noticing, helped her into a cab, and they headed to a hotel. The next morning, Sienna woke up in the bed, her clothes scattered on the floor, the shower running. She checked her phone. Saturday, no school. Tova was the last thing on her mind. As she got out of bed, her gaze landed on a blotch of red stain on the white sheets, and everything clicked. Panic surged through her as the memory rushed back. She quickly changed and ran back to school, avoiding Zion and the guys for 2 months. But the memories didn't leave her. One day, while walking into the canteen, the smell of the food hit her, making her turn back and rush to the restroom to vomit. She panicked. Could it be? She couldn't believe it. Over the weekend, she bought a pregnancy test. After testing herself, she stared at the result, positive. Her world spun, and tears filled her eyes as she silently cried. What was she going to do? She couldn't have an abortion. She wouldn't be able to live with the guilt. Tova walked into the bathroom and found Sienna crying uncontrollably. She rushed to her side, concern flooding her eyes.
What happened? Are you hurt?
She asked, her voice filled with worry. Sienna shook her head and managed to whisper.
I'm pregnant.
Tova's eyes widened in shock.
What? How?
She exclaimed, her voice trembling. Sienna sobbed, and through her tears, she managed to say one word.
Zion.
Anger flashed in Tova's eyes, ready to confront Zion. But Sienna stopped her voice pleading.
He doesn't know. Please, Tova, don't go after him.
Tova took a deep breath, her anger cooling, before she helped Sienna back to their room. Sienna didn't attend school at all that week, trying to process everything that had happened. By the time the new week arrived, she had gathered enough courage to confront Zion. She searched for him all over campus, but couldn't find him. In desperation, she asked Zara and Juniper where he was. They exchanged a glance before Zara casually said,
He moved abroad with his fiancée.
Sienna felt like the world had stopped.
Pardon?
She asked, barely believing her ears. Zara scoffed.
Are you deaf? Get it into your brainless skull Zion used you, dumped you, and now he's abroad with the fiancé his parents picked out for him.
Heartbroken and unable to process any more, Sienna ran back to her room, tears streaming down her face. Tova soon came in, and once Sienna told her what had happened, Tova held her, offering comfort as Sienna cried in her arms. When Sienna had calmed down, she decided to call her parents. The school allowed her to contact them, and when they found out what had happened, they were devastated. It wasn't long before Sienna started packing to go home for a while. Tova helped her, and when everything was ready, all they had to do was wait for Sienna's dad to arrive. As they finished, Tova looked at Sienna with a sad expression.
I'm sorry.
She said quietly. Sienna blinked, surprised.
What are you sorry about?
Tova explained, her voice filled with regret.
I should have done more than just pray for you. As a friend, I should have reached out to your parents or found a way to make sure you weren't alone in this.
Sienna smiled gently, holding Tova's hand.
No, Tova, it's not just you. I pushed both you and God away. I embraced the wrong things and I let my light hide. I should have stayed true to what I knew was right.
They embraced, forgiving each other in that moment. Together, they prayed for forgiveness. Just as Sienna finished, her phone rang. It was her dad. She told him.
I'll be right down.
Sienna stood up, grabbed her suitcase, and hugged Tova one last time. She opened the door and walked out to meet her dad. As she walked down the school hallway, she looked at the other students, realizing just how easy it was to get lost in the crowd. She prayed quietly in her heart.
God, help them not to make the same mistake I did. Help them see that popularity and looking cool aren't everything. I should have shown my light, not hidden it.
With a final glance, she stepped out, ready to go home and hoping that her experience would be a warning to others.